All right, this is a recording of a translation and discussion of Chapter 29, Ecce Romani, Going to the Market. Cornelia summa celeritate se paravit. Cornelia, paravit, prepared. It's perfect tense with a perfect stem and a perfect ending, so prepared, did prepare, has prepared. And then se is the accusative direct object. It's a reflexive, herself. Summa celeritate, an ablative showing you the manner. It is with the greatest speed. Ignore the translation in the actual book down at the bottom, as fast as possible. It is with the greatest speed. Celeritate is the word itself for speed from the noun celeritas, celeritatis. Brevi tempore, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, a short time, in a short time. Mater et filia, the mother and the daughter, ferebantur, were carried, were being carried, a servis, by the slaves, per urbem, through the city. Take a look at a servis in the first line at the very end. It is what we call an ablative of personal agent. Whenever you have a passive verb, like ferebantur is indeed a passive verb, then you need an agent to be expressed in the ablative case. It is almost always going to be a person, that's why we call it personal agent, and it is going to have the preposition a or ab. We've seen the preposition a or ab mean away, but in this instance it is going to here mean by, and it gives you the sense as to who is actually completing the action, because remember, the subject with a passive verb doesn't do the action at all. The action is actually committed by what is known here, again, as the ablative of personal agent. In viis, in the streets, erat ingens multitudo, there was, erat, imperfect of sum esse, a huge multitude, hominum, from homo hominis, a third declension, so the um is genitive plural of humans. Please note that multitudo is a noun in the nominative. And very often you find that you can create nouns this way, with the nominative being tudo and then the genitive tudinis with all the third declension endings that come along with it. Concursabant enim servi milites viri pueri mulieres. Please note the ascendaton you have with the list of subjects, for they are all intermixed, doing the things at the same time. And take a look at the verb concursabant, which comes from concurso, concursare. This is an example of a frequentative verb. If you take a verb like curro, that means to run, curro, curre, cucurri, cursus, and you were to take the fourth principal part of it, and you were to turn it into its own verb by taking the stem of that fourth principal part and making it first conjugation, curso, cursare, like what we have here, cone on the front of it as a prefix, then it means not just to run, but to run repeatedly, and that's why the definition is to run to and fro. We call these verbs that imply a repeated action frequentatives. You can see it easily as well with the verb spicio, spicere, spexi, spectus, which means to catch sight of, but if you were to take the fourth principal part, specto, spectare, and turn it into a verb like I just did, it means to spot repeatedly, which would be to watch. This is why we don't say that we look at TV, we watch it because we are looking at it constantly or frequentatively. And kokosabat here means to run to and fro. So anim, for, slaves, soldiers, men, boys, women, mulieres, were running to and fro, they were running about. The ona ingentia. The huge loads, these are neuter plural from onus, oneris, and indeed it is the subject of the passive verb portabant. So huge loads were being carried by the slaves. Another ablative personal agent, a servis. For the passive verb, it does not reveal with the subject who commits the action, because with passive verbs the subject is acted upon. So the agent is expressed in the ablative. Nam inter diu nihil intra urbem vehiculo portatur. For inter diu, during the day, nothing nihil is carried, portatur, a present passive, is carried, is being carried, by vehicle, vehiculo, in the ablative. Inside the city. Intra means inside. Do not confuse it with the other preposition inter, which means between. That's the difference between an intranet, which is a network inside an organization, versus the internet, which is the network between everybody and organizations. Please note here as well, vehiculo. Vehiculo is not an ablative of personal agent. One, it does not have the preposition a or ab, and then secondly, it's not a person. This is your ablative of means. It gives the means by which nothing is carried. Omnia quae videt Cornelia, eam delectant. If I were underlining with various colors, the main clause is omnia eam delectant. All things delight her. And so the quae videt Cornelia is obviously your relative clause with the relative pronoun quae. Because quae is replacing omnia, which is neuter, plural, and omnia is nominative, then quae here is also going to be plural, same number, and it'll also be neuter, same gender. And it is accusative is quae because it is the object. The subject of that clause that I would underline in non-blue, red perhaps, would be quae videt Cornelia. All things which Cornelia sees. Those all things delight her. So all things which Cornelia sees delights her. Cornelia is doing the seeing in that middle clause. Nunc conspicit poetam versus regitantem, nunc mendicos pecuniam petentes, nunc lecticam elegantissimam, quae ab acto servis portatur. Here, what we have is the repeating of the word nunc in the various clauses, meaning as the literary device anaphora, and you have the quick succession of the understood repetition of the verb conspicit. So now she spots, meaning Cornelia, a poet, but it's not any kind of poet, it's a recitantem, a present active participle, recito, recitare, meaning to recite. So what kind of poet? The poet reciting verses, versus, a fourth declension accusative plural, long US. Now, and then implied again, conspicit, she spots mendicos, beggars, but they are the petentes from peto petere, seeking money. It is the seeking money beggars. Again, petentes, a present active participle. And now, again, you imply conspicit, she spots a most elegant litter, a most, or a very elegant, elegantissimam litter, lecticam, a litter, quae, which, now this quae is different than the quae you see in line 5. It is taking as its antecedent lecticam, meaning that this quae in line 5 is singular and feminine, unlike, or line 6 I meant to say, unlike the quae in line 5, which was plural and neuter. So a litter which, portator, is carried, and then again we see the adverb of a personal agent, ob octo servis, by 8 slaves. Please remember that all numbers above the number 3 are not declinable. So octo, even though it has the form octo, is modifying servis. So octo, in fact, is plural and ablative. In ea here is referring to that litter, in it, even though it would be feminine, ea. A homo basus, a fat man, recumbit, from recumbo, recumbere, reclines. That's where we get the word a recumbent bike, which is a bike that you lie down and, of course, pedal. So in it, a fat man reclines, a fat man, qui, who, librum legit, who reads a book, who is reading a book. Subito Cornelia duo servos. Suddenly, Cornelia, you go to the end of the sentence, or the clause, and see conspicit, spots, duos servos, 2 slaves, and they are the festinantes. Again, another present active participle, you can tell because of the nt with the third declension ending, and it's from festino, festinare, meaning to hurry. 2 slaves, what kind? The hurrying slaves, hurrying through the street. Quorum alter. Again, whenever you have alter and you can imply another alter, remember that you translate them correlatively, one and the other, instead of just saying the other. So, of whom one, or even better in English expression would be one of whom carries portat, a porcum parvulum, a little bitty pig. Remember that parvulum is not just little, but little bitty, because it is a diminutive. Eo ipso tempore, by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, that time, eo tempore, ipso, itself. Remember that is id, which eo is obviously from. When it modifies something, like it does here with the word time, tempore, it is going to have the meaning of hic haec hoc, this, or elealalud, that, and so I've chosen that. So at that time, ipso, itself, the intensifier. The porcus at the end of the sentence, even though it is the subject, flees, escapes, effugio, effugere, a manibus, out of his hands, cavete, exclamant, adstantes, sed frustra, be careful, cavete, the abstantes, the standing by ones. Here the adstantes, which is given in your book and the definition at the bottom as a noun, masculine and plural, the bystanders, is actually just a present active participle, which is an adjective, that has been substantized. So literally the one standing by, they exclamant, they shout, sed frustra, but in vain. Homo quidam. Remember qui quo quod, when you put a dom at the end of it, is going to mean a certain. And so here, a certain man, and again, to know what it's modifying, you don't look at the dom, but rather you look at the qui. So a certain man, qui, who runs through the road, through the street, per viam, celeriter, quickly, that is your adverb. He, non potest, is not able, porcum vitare, to avoid, vitare, the pig. He falls, cadit, ad terram, to the ground. Paulisper, for a short time. He, the subject of jacet, the T there, and it's the Gemains one. He, groaning, he jacets, he lies in the mud, in luto. Jacet is not to be confused with jacit, that would have an I, that would be he throws, but this is the one jaceo, jacere, which of course means to lie. Dane, day, then, or next. He, again the subject is petit, with the T that is there, but now the he is modified by comotus, a perfect passive participle from comoio, comoere. Having been moved, ira, by anger, he looks for, he seeks the slave, a quo, from whom. This a that we see in line 12 is not the a that introduces an ablative of personal agent. This is merely the one that means away from. So it is from whom the pig has escaped. If you look at the principal parts at the bottom here of alfugio, alfugere, alfugi, you see the only difference between the present stem and the perfect stem is the long u. That's how I know that alfugit is perfect. He fled, from whom the pig fled, did flee, has fled. If it were a short u, the other letters would be the exact same, and it would be the present. He does flee. Estrixa. There is a fight, a quarrel, rixa. So, finem rixae non videt Cornelia. Cornelia did not see. Videt is perfect with the perfect stem, the perfect ending. E is the it, the end, the finem of the fight, rixae, in the genitive, quod, because, quote here is not from the chart qui qua quod, it is not a relative, the slaves already tolerant. Now, you would have a terrible time trying to find the verb tolerant in the back of the book because you would probably look under the T's. You should be looking under the F's because it is from the verb pharaoh, fere, tuli, latus. Tul is the perfect stem of pharaoh, meaning to bring. Here it has the perfect stem tul with erant, which is pluperfect. So, because the slaves already, yam, had carried the selos, the sedan chairs, in aliam viam, into or onto another street. Tandem advenerunt. At last they arrived. They came to venia venire, with perfect tense here, advenerunt, ad, to or towards, so that means arrive. So they have arrived, ad eam tabernam, to, and here eam is modifying it tabernam. Remember that when it modifies a word, it is going to have the equivalency of hikakok or lealalud, so to that shop, or to this shop, quam, which, and this is of course the relative pronoun, they were seeking petebant. Quam petebant is its own little clause, a subordinate one. They descenderunt, they climbed, they did climb, they have climbed, perfect tense with the perfect stem and the perfect ending, down from de celis, the sedan chairs, to Aurelia. Then Aurelia, Inquit said, we destine, nay, asking the question or implying that it is, did you see, have you seen, illam lecticam, that litter, in qua, in which, qua here is taking lecticam as its antecedent, that's why they are both feminine, and they are both singular. The homo obesus, the fat man, recumbebat, was reclining. Unus e libertis caesaris ipsius, one, out of the freedman. A libertus is a freedman. It is the title that you would give to a slave who has been manumitted. Remember that manumission is the term for freeing a slave. And Aurelia, ever the social ladder climber, is always wanting to hobnob or to associate with those of the upper classes. She is a rather arrogant and, some would say for a more coarse term, a stuck-up woman as the position of a senator's wife. And so here she's being very impressed that it is someone associated with the emperor. And that's what she then says, one unus e libertis, out of the freedmen of the emperor himself, Caesaris, Ipsius. Remember that they called all the emperors Caesar. Another word about the liberty, of course, is that they are freedmen, but after that they are freed, most likely they would not strike out on their own. They would become what are known as clientes, or a client of the person who had one time been their master, but now the master is merely going to be their patronus, their patron. The patron-client relationship is a relationship in the ancient Roman world in which men have a relationship with those that are of a lower class or a lower tier, usually, and those men would get the benefit of the favor of the more powerful men and the resources of the more powerful men, and they would pay back, not literally pay back, but they would pay back these more powerful men with their support. Said quid occidit, but what has happened? Occidit would be the exact same form if it were present. What is happening? What does happen? What happens? And it would be the same form if it were perfect. What has happened? What did happen? Fumum video, I see smoke. Fumum, et flammas, and flames, which sets us up for the very next chapter. Fire. Fire happens in Rome on a daily basis, and so obviously it is going to be something that they witness on their day out shopping. So that is chapter 29. Best of luck, study away, and do a good job for the quizzes. Thanks so much.